So I wanted to come on here and just make a short video to clear up a common misconception. And this is about the question of whether or not dismissive avoidance can have an abandonment fear. And if they can really feel afraid of being abandoned or being pulled away from in relationships. So oftentimes when we see, for example, a dismissive avoidant with an anxious preoccupied attachment style in our traditional anxious avoidant trap, what you'll tend to see is a dismissive avoidant almost never really feels or expresses any fear of abandonment. And this is generally because the dismissive avoidant needs a lot more space than the anxious preoccupied and is a lot more independent and derives their sense of self more from their internal world and from their creature comforts and the things that they rely on for a sense of peace and safety, like whatever those habits might be. Whereas the anxious preoccupied tends to derive their sense of self from the people around them, particularly their romantic relationships or people that they're dating. So first you'll see that because of that, we'll see the dismissive avoidant constantly kind of pull back, which is a form of a primary trigger pattern, which I should make other videos about actually. But every relationship tends to have a set of primary and secondary trigger patterns, meaning that whatever your biggest core wounds are will tend to, your reaction to dealing with your own core wound being triggered by your partner will tend to in turn trigger your partner's biggest core wound. So for example, you'll see this very clearly illustrated here. The dismissive avoidant often has a fear of being trapped or being too vulnerable and then feeling unsafe in that. So they fear being trapped. So they pull back, right? Then the anxious preoccupied fears being abandoned. So when they see the DA pull back, their reaction to that is to try to get closer, which then in turn re-triggers the dismissive avoidant feeling more overwhelmed, more trapped. They try to pull back. The anxious preoccupied then feels more anxious and fearing of being abandoned because of the DA, and it goes around and around and around and around, hence the anxious avoidant trap. And that's one of many facets of how that works or what that looks like. And I'm just using that as a means to an end to illustrate sort of experiences here. By the way, if you want to do a big deep dive into that, though, the primary and secondary trigger patterns, I have a course you can check out for free for 7 days called the How to Repair Any Relationship course. It gives you the good parameters for how to deal with different challenges, helps you identify your primary and secondary trigger patterns in relationships, use the exact strategies you need to break through them in 3 very simple steps, and learn to communicate in a way that helps to de-escalate conflict very rapidly between partners if you're on the rocks or going through sort of a hard time. And don't know how to work through problems. It gives you the exact steps you need for that as well. And again, you can check it out for free for 7 days using the link in the description box below. That gives you access to all of PDS, including I do 4 live weekly webinars in there. You can come in, ask me questions on video, off video, however you want to kind of connect and chat. And yeah, I'll just leave that there. So anyway, so going into this, right, you see that there's this sort of in the DAAP cycle, DAs don't really have room to even fear abandonment, right? They're too busy in their deactivated side. However, with fearful avoidance, dismissive avoidance can fear abandonment because abandonment is not just core wound based. We can also attach to somebody, they meet our needs, and then we can fear having those needs taken away. Now, while dismissive avoidance will experience a lot less of that core wound, dismissive avoidance tend to have this deep, unconscious, assumed sense of abandonment, but it's not something that they're really in touch with at a more conscious and aware level, or even subconscious level. It's buried so deep, it's hard to retrieve essentially for a DA. So while that's there to a certain degree, it's there, but it's hard for them to get in touch with is a better way of saying it. Um, Essentially what's happening is that they can also fear somebody pulling away from them and losing that person. But it's more from a needs perspective. The vast majority of the time, it's more oh, I was connected to that person. Why are they pulling away? Now, here's the difference. And this is what's most important about understanding attachment styles. The way that a dismissive avoidant responds to that fear of abandonment is what characterizes them as the dismissive avoidant. And it's that every time they fear abandonment, rather than having approach-oriented behaviors or subconscious strategies and attempts to gain more closeness to that person, instead, their way of protecting themselves is to go oh, I don't like this feeling and that this person has so much power over me. So I need to pull away from them. I need to break away from them. I need to minimize my attachment needs, right? I need to pretend to myself or convince myself I don't really need them. And so they will almost always have a more avoidant approach, unless, of course, they're doing the work to become more secure and open up and talk through things. But as a general rule, what is going to characterize somebody as a dismissive avoidant is that when they have fears of abandonment or fears of the relationship disconnecting or breaking apart, their response to those fears is to further shut down and pull away. And that tends to be quite the pervasive, overarching coping mechanism for the dismissive avoidant as a whole. Fearful avoidants can fear abandonment, go anxious, or go avoidant. They can respond either way. APs tend to almost exclusively always try to gain proximity and get closer. So it's not that the dismissive avoidant can't have fears of those things or feel uncomfortable in those things. It's that their response to those things is always to pull away and try to disconnect. And that's really pervasively what tends to characterize somebody as that DA and the DA response mechanism. So I hope this makes sense. I hope that clarified because I think it's a really important video and concept, especially for those of you who are looking to understand your attachment style. There's also a free attachment style quiz you can take using the link down below. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know questions or comments you have, anything in the comments, please tell me. And also, if you are new, I make daily YouTube videos every single day about attachment styles, the subconscious mind, how to reprogram things, how to master your emotional state, you name it. So please subscribe and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss any videos. Thank you so much for watching.